Welcome to Goodrick Tutorials. This is a place where I'm going to show you how I make my scenes, how I texture my models, how I do post work, how I do my backgrounds, well, pretty much anything CG related. So make sure to subscribe to the channel and make sure to like this video. And now, the first video tutorial. This is the scene I'm going to show you how I made. It's a Earth scene from space scene, and it's made for a plate tectonic educational movie, and I've been using the apps Gaia for the textures. I've used TerraGens for the scene setup and the rendering, and I've used After Effects for this project. So here is how I made it. So this is the start of the project, the creation of the maps, and this is the final result. This terrain consists of two main elements, the island arc and the trench down the middle. So that's pretty much what I've been aiming for from the very beginning of the creation of the terrain. The first thing I did, however, was to alter the size of the terrain, and that is in terrain definition, which under the build tab, and then I just bumped up the scale and the height. I don't know how long time I spent looking for that tab to begin with. So it is in the build, and at the very bottom you find this scale tool. That's to get the sense of the larger terrain. So to start things off, I focused on the island arc, which is over here, and for that I used a draw node and simply just drawed out the basic shape that I wanted to achieve. I played a bit around with the displacement and the height until I got something I was happy with. This transform node I actually added a little bit later in the process because I wanted the island arc to be located next to the trench, so I had to move it a bit, so maybe you'll need to do that too. The transform node also contains a raise node over here, so I can get the terrain to be a little bit higher than I originally had from the draw map. So this was something I was pretty pleased with. The island arc, of course, would be above the ocean surface, so it'll erode, and placing two erode nodes after each other gives a pretty nice effect, I thought. So this is the result I was aiming for, this sort of fractal-like mountain chain. Now we're in 1K up here, as you see, and most details are lost, but they will be there when we export the terrain. So with this, I thought no real need to work more on that, so let's focus on the trench. And here I also made a draw node, which in this case looked a bit like this, simply just some consecutive some lines down the center of the terrain, with a bit of playing around with the strength of the drawings here. The two draw nodes here are the exact same, only this one have the enforced peaks toggled, so I got this sort of trench-like thing down the middle here, and once combined, this is what it looks like. And to get a trench, of course, I needed to invert it. To get a bit of definition on the ocean floor, I used the Badlands and the Badlands node, and then combined the two for this result here. So yeah, this is what I went for. With a bit of hydro and a bit of sediment, I got a result that I thought was sufficient for this project. And once combined with the island arc chain up here, then this is the result, which is, well, the final result for the terrain. The textures, I started off with the seafloor, and for that I added the texture node here. You see I made a portal up here and the final combine node, which I then added to the texture node here, and then added a sat map and found a darkish rocky color for the seafloor. The island arc up here, of course, again, is above the ocean, so naturally it needed to be green to give the sensation of some vegetation. And once mixed, this is the result, because I just added a mask from the final erosion node up here, which then separated the seafloor from the vegetation, which is, of course, on the higher grounds. Now, the island arc here doesn't look quite complete as it is right here. These mountains would be at least 3-4 kilometers high, so the vegetation at the top would be, it wouldn't be there. So I needed to get a bit of rock texture up here on the higher grounds of the island arc. And for that, I chose yet another sat map, which looks like this, with a bit of light sediments down down some of the areas here of the mountains, and I mixed that with the texture I already got at the from the initial texturing process, but I used the height node here for the mask. So I only wanted the rock texture up here at the very highest peaks. So here is the result. As you can see, the vegetation are now gone from the higher grounds here, and we got these naked rocks up here at the peaks. So with the mask and without the mask. Lastly, I wanted these peaks to appear to be very high, so a bit of snowfall was added, the snowfall node, and I used that as a mask. The snow texture was actually a sand texture. I liked it not to be completely white, but a little bit of variation in the colors, and a little bit of subtlety to it. So I used the snowfall as a mask and this as the snow texture, and combined that using a mixer with the texture I already have. And here's the result, and this was the end result that I chose to proceed with to the next step, which was to export these textures into Terragen. What I got here was that I have marked 2 of my nodes for export, the final mixer and the final combined node here, and I used the, mark for export, here we go, and I used the TIFF 16-bit as the file type I wanted to use, because it would be available to get right into Terragen. So I didn't need any conversion or anything. I just could use those maps as they were. So once that was done, start build. I wouldn't do that right now, but once the files were done, I started off looking into the animation and the rendering in Terragen. So the next step was to get the maps into Terragen. And this is what Terragen looks like once you open it. And what I pretty much did here was to go into the terrain tab and add terrain, load height field, and find TIFF. And here is the combined node, which I then used as the terrain. And as you can see, the something have happened over here at the terrain. So here we go, and if we scroll out a bit, eventually we will begin to recognize some of the features that I got from from Gaia. Here's the island arc, and here's the trench. Now, if let's say we stick with this format here. So once we go in here and see, we now have a height of 2,500 meters almost. And of course, in real life, these island arcs are a lot bigger. What I was aiming for was to get a sort of a space scene where we see a large feature from very high up. So 2.5 kilometers simply isn't enough. So what I did here was, instead of just sticking with the scale, I went into my height field node here and went down to resize, and I resized the terrain to, I believe it was 1,000 kilometers on each side. Now, I of course will need to scroll out quite a bit in order to find the, in order to get to a height which where I can see the entire terrain. So up here, I'm not sure how high we are right now. 400 kilometers still isn't enough. And now we are beginning to see most of the terrain. And okay, is that enough? It probably is. So here, and we can see the arc of the planet. Now, what we have lost is we have completely lost the height definition. Again, we need adjust vertical and then multiply height by, let's say, 100. And the trench is back. And if I'm not mistaken, the island arc should appear right out here on the right-hand side. It is right there. So now we got the height map imported, for the shaders to be imported, for the colors to be imported. We go over here and add a image map, find our image map, which is somewhere in this mix here, position center, and of course we'll need to adjust the size so it matches the height field. So here we go, and now we have the map imported. For this piece, of course, we'll need to add a water object too and adjust the height, and it's a bit of trial and error to get that correct. Here is the final file which I used. I used pretty much the same principle as I just showed you, and what I did was I animated the sun to come up over here from the left. It started off at a elevation of -2 degrees, so only parts of the terrain was lit, and ended up at about 10 degrees. So the entire island arc was in daylight. I added a bit of clouds to give a sense of scale, and of course the water object is down here too. I don't know, I ended up with a water level of nearly 13 kilometers, only to make it fit. And that's pretty much it. The camera here, of course, was animated too. I placed it where I liked, pressed set animation key all, and moved the slider all the way to frame number 600 here, and did the same thing, and the camera was then moving as I liked it. Once that was done, it was time for rendering, and for this one I probably would have used a bit higher anti-aliasing, but render time was an issue too, so it ended up at 3. Usually I work around 6. And the atmosphere quality, I also would like to have a bit more samples there than 15, but then again, the render time was an issue. So this is where it ended up, and I rendered the entire scene, all 600 frames in TIFF, and After that, I imported it into After Effects for the final icing on the cake. Now, a few hours later, the animation is now rendered, and I've imported it into After Effects. And without any effects at all, this is what it ended up looking like. Here we got the sunrise, and the island arc is appearing out of the darkness here. It all looks pretty good, I think. So not much After Effects is needed, but a few things though that I wanted to enhance a bit. So what I started off doing was I used the Lux effect, which is a part of the Trapcode suite, and they have a bunch of different sort of filters, which alters the recording up here. So here is with the filter, and here is without the filter. What I really liked was that these red skies down here was sort of more visible with this filter on, and a bit of contrast didn't hurt either. So this was the look that I settled on, and I reduced the strength a bit until I thought it was suitable for this project. The atmosphere over here I thought would look quite nice if we just enhanced the glow of it just a tiny bit. So I added the Trapcode glow noise too. The Trapcode glow effect too, and got a bit of a more glowing, bright atmosphere. Now, as the day progresses, more and more of the scene started to light up, so the strength of the intensity of the glow was reduced, so it wouldn't be all bright. And this is the result of that. The last thing I did was I didn't like this completely empty background here, so I added a few stars to it. This is in fact a star map environment, which I usually use for my space scenes, and I placed a mask, which I then animated. So as the camera moves around the Earth, the less and less of the stars can be seen. And that's pretty much it. Not much more was required for this scene to be what it turned out to become. So yeah, this is it, and the result of a trip to Gaia, to Terrigen, and lastly in After Effects. And this is the final result, an island arc seen from space. Eventually the water will disappear from the scene and you can see what is underneath the waves, but that's probably a subject for a different tutorial. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and return for more tutorials in the near future. Thank you.